KGW. Not sure if you caught my story earlier today. It was pretty early for those of you watching right now. You may not have been up. It was at 6:45 on Sunrise. It's about women in the cannabis industry. And on that subject matter, we wanted to have this Facebook Live conversation, this real casual conversation with two outstanding women who are in the industry, Marissa Rodriguez with the Sweet Life and Urban Pharms, and Miranda Weigler, right, with Cannabis Connects, a digital network that really connects people within the legal cannabis industry. And so, well, welcome, first and foremost. These ladies are, you guys have been in on the ground level since day one, pretty much, since before recreational legalization, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you've watched this industry just change rapidly.
Daily.
I want to know, and I'll get to you, but your story, just real quick, what was appealing about cannabis to you? Why, as a female, or just a person in general, did you want to get in?
Oh gosh, it's never been done before, and it's really fun and exciting to do something that's never been done before.
And what is it that you do on a daily basis?
I assist customers, vendors that we represent, our farm with compliance, making sure that everybody's following the rules, and operations also at the farm and at the Sweet Life distribution.
Awesome. Okay, and for you, what made you want to get in?
I think this is the greatest economic opportunity Oregon's seen since timber, and as a renewable resource, it's pretty exciting that we could have both economics and sustainability at the same time. And Oregon's had an indigenous cannabis industry for a long time that I saw when I was growing up and I wanted to be a part of. I was in corporate life and I got tired of the misogyny and the way you had to be. And so, like Marissa says, it's never been done before, and being able to be a part of such an important change in Oregon and be able to hopefully create a different kind of a corporate culture or a different kind of commercial culture was really appealing to me. So I quit my corporate job and jumped in.
Well, that's a perfect segue into what we're talking about, because as exciting and kind of opportunistic as this industry is, it also is kind of now becoming a little bit more standardized in terms of these traditional business and economic structures, right? You would say from corporate America jumping into cannabis, you didn't expect that, and now it's kind of seeped in.
Yeah, when I started 3 years ago, I joined Women Grow, which was one of the fastest growing organizations, which was specifically for women networking. It's how I met Mary Lou Burton, who I work with at Connects now.
The godmother.
The godmother, the cheerleader of the industry. She
Awesome.
keeps everybody going. It's really amazing to see her energy, and it was exciting to see women like Mary Lou, like Marissa, who are intelligent and capable and groundbreaking, and it's been a little sad to see those women have to find other opportunities because of the changes in the industry that venture capital and some of the federal ongoing prohibitions have, the conditions that they've created that makes it harder for women to thrive and harder for women leaders to continue and to survive sometimes.
Would you agree with that?
I would. I guess specifically to regulation, as we were talking earlier about tax law and how that affects small businesses. 280E is a huge challenge. It encourages maybe women-run small businesses to participate in consolidation that they wouldn't otherwise participate in, and then they get pushed out.
And elaborating on consolidation, I mean, the struggle, particularly in Oregon, right? There's oversaturation and it's really competitive because everyone kind of flooded the market, flooded the industry. So when we talk consolidation, would you say there were a lot more mom and pop shops, kind of like dispensaries or just businesses, farms, and now we're not seeing that as much?
I think that we're not seeing it as much, and I think in the future we're going to see even less, which, yeah.
So these big aggregators, these big companies that are they buying up the smaller companies?
Yeah, I mean, and that's happened, even my first job was working for someone who had grand plans to buy a bunch of retails. It's since we were regulated by the OHA in the medical days.
It's capitalism.
It is.
Do you feel like that's happened though at a quicker pace than you expected?
I find that my day-to-day is I'm like really in the moment, and it's only recently that we've like allowed ourselves to kind of like take a breath and like look back and look forward. So I can't say that I was making grand predictions about what was going to happen. We were just figuring out how to pave the road as we drove on it.
I think we talk about, and what the story focuses on are these data points, right? So you look at 2015 when marijuana was legal medicinally, right, in Oregon, because it was 2017 it became legal in the state of Oregon, correct? Or 16?
The 1st of January, we switched over fully.
Yeah.
Voted, though, in 16.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Voted in 15.
Voted 91
regulated
and-
in 16.
yeah.
Okay.
Switched over fully in 17.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Okay, it's confusing. I came from somewhere where it wasn't legal at all, so it's, you know. But so when you look at how 2015, how women played such a major role in executive positions, founders, CEOs, they were 36%. A Marijuana Business Daily survey shows 36% of executive roles were held by women in cannabis. And when we talk about, we can get into this in a moment, we talk about cannabis, it's primary and ancillary services. But that number has fallen drastically in just 2 years. In 2017, it was 27%, which is still above the national average, but 27% from 36%. I mean, what does that tell you?
Capital flight. The sessions rescinded the Cole memo, so we had less investors, so there was just less cash flowing to the industry. State taxes took out a huge amount of liquidity because the industry was paying for the industry and it all kind of stayed together. But when the state taxes come out, that liquidity is just out of the industry, and without the ability for other investors to get in, it's difficult. And California started to legalize, so a lot of capital went there because their consumer market is 10 times the size of Oregon. So while we're innovative and we're consolidating and becoming more competitive and mature faster than a lot of other places, we don't have the capital coming here because we're into the difficult parts of legalization. That timeline indicates legalization is not a stroke of a pen and then it's done. It's a question of what are the water rights for agricultural businesses? What's the air direction based on cross-germination in agricultural regions? What does the testing look like for the soil and for the final product? Legalization is a long-term process that requires a huge amount of investment in capital and is somewhat unpredictable because you're not always sure what the government's going to do. So you can make a 5-year business plan, but it's possible that plank 2 in year 3 changes because the OLCC says, well, now this thing is possibly illegal. So we don't have the capacity and the excess that we used to have, and women bear that brunt more than other people. I would also say people of color, anyone who doesn't have that trusted incumbent, I'm good with money sort of attachment to their identity, it just makes it harder for them to negotiate in such reduced conditions.
Anything to add to that?
I think about this a lot.
And the story couldn't even get into that. I mean, the story really talks in a 4-minute piece, talks a lot about like the bigger picture, not so much the government intervention and the taxes and all that. But going back to that point, and I'm curious to hear what you guys both think, is investment and venture capital, because women get 2.3% of venture capital dollars. The rest goes to men. And so in an industry that is like capital intensive and, you know, traditional bank loans are few and far between because banks are so wary, how do women get the money they need to get started or to keep going?
I don't know.
Yeah, if anybody has ideas, we would love them.
I mean, there's a bunch of them up in Vancouver right now. Yeah. We're hopefully going to get some of
fingers
that money.
crossed. There's some pretty warriors.
Lobbying or what?
So the initiative is an accelerator focused on women. They were on Yahoo Finance.
My story is about that.
Absolutely. So they're up there right now pitching, some women.
Yes.
And
hopefully they win.
We send good vibes with them. And yeah, wish them the best. They've been working really hard to be able to figure out the right language and the right numbers and what is it that investors are looking for, what's the exit strategy, and I was very convinced by their pitch. I think that somebody should give them lots of money, but.
And here's something very anecdotal, but Miranda and I have talked about this before. I feel like women are less likely to make pie in the sky predictions than men are.
Yes.
And so I know personally, I will not make a promise that I am not 100% confident that I will deliver on. Mm-hmm. Whereas I have encountered male counterparts who are like, I'm going to do that. I don't know how I'm going to get there. I have no plan. Yeah. But I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm a planner.
More thoughtful.
Yeah. I mean, like I said before we started talking, like, talking is not my thing. I'm a very deliberate person, and so.
Well, you're doing a good job talking.
Yeah. But
Thanks.
we want a project plan and a timeline
Yeah.
and a budget and
Yeah.
who's going to do what
Right.
span of responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
And that, it's hard to make those promises. And I'm afraid to make those promises, especially in an investment situation, because I know if I can't keep them, the
Right.
likelihood they take my company, which is my baby, because I'm less able to negotiate. Women aren't able to negotiate as well.
Right.
We're penalized for doing the kinds of negotiating that you would have to do in this industry.
Perhaps the repercussions are more severe as a female if you fail or if you promise something you don't follow through.
Sure, right? I mean, we were talking about this a couple weeks ago on the phone, that MedMen
The Fire Festival of
fall
Cannabis.
on their face, and then they get another $250
$50 million.
after falling on their face.
Wow.
That wouldn't.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have that opportunity to even go and ask for more money
Interesting.
after, falling on our
Failing.
face.
Yeah.
And-
Interesting.
If your CFO is suing you and your general counsel and your COO resign, I would worry how you're going to steward that $250 million. Like, I'm sure they have a plan. I would never sleep at night. I would never sleep at night because that's a huge amount of money and a huge amount of responsibility.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that goes back to, and also what the story discusses and what we've all kind of talked about is investing in the people that look like you. So that's obvious in corporate America. That's obvious in the startup culture, but you just maybe didn't expect it to be the case in cannabis because it was so new, so full of opportunity. Women were jumping in because it's creative and there's so much for them to do in the ancillary services and whatnot. But do you feel like that those traditional kind of more, I guess, I don't know, I don't want to say patriarchal, but just traditional business models?
I call it predatory capitalism because you can call it patriarchy, but small business, because it's networks and because it's personal, tends to be win-win. When we make a deal, we both walk away happy, and we feel like that's the kind of capitalism that we want to do. Corporate capitalism tends to be more predatory. How do I win the most, which usually means you have to lose somewhat. And so as we move towards a more predatory model, we're unable to do win-win. And it's a split in the industry right now. I've had a lot of conversations with men who are upset about that as well, who also want to be able to do that win-win. And part of why they appreciated the medical days was because it was more of a small business, a networked, a personal thing.
Yeah.
And they feel the same pressures that we do to, is this what I have to do to get money and to survive?
Right.
Or is it possible to continue to try and have a relationship-based capitalism?
Yeah.
And it's also a problem not just for our industry. I think it's true in a lot of places right now, unfortunately.
Do you feel what's happening is, these cannabis industries, as they consolidate, as these, more successful businesses perhaps run by men grow, that they're trying to load their investment deck with people that were maybe successful in other industries and are now jumping ship and coming to cannabis? Is that what's happening?
I mean, I wouldn't say John Boehner has a long history in cannabis. He's kind of been on the other side for a long time.
Yeah.
So the fact that he's going to profit $16 million while kids are still in jail for this seems a little obscene.
Yeah.
Just a little.
Yeah.
It's lucrative.
It is. And when money gets involved, people get weird,
Yeah. I mean, it's and all over the country. I mean, Oregon's a prime example of big business coming in, right? Like, talk about mainstream money a little bit and how people from other industries are now coming to cannabis finding that it is lucrative.
Oh, I don't know that it's lucrative.
You don't think so?
I think if they promise it's lucrative.
Yeah.
I think they think it's going to be lucrative.
yeah.
I thought it was going to be lucrative.
Yeah.
It's not. Market price is dropping. You have to sell 10 times
True.
more than you did 2 years
True.
ago to make the same revenue. It's a grind. It's hard. It's a labor of love.
I mean, like what we were talking about with prohibition, the ongoing federal prohibition, when 37 states want to be doing this, I mean, we're creating 37 redundant supply chains and sets of regulations, and people don't think about those kinds of sunk costs, but
Right.
that money, instead of being invested in social justice or in social equity or reparations or the possibility of making it more small business or bringing more people in or doing more education or getting people out of jail, we're continuing this mythology that everyone in every state is going to make the early revenues of Colorado, which is not feasible
Yeah.
because every state has to invest in regulatory, like testing regimes. We were
Yeah.
talking about this,
Or
you know.
we were touring the warehouse this morning, and we were talking about the blue UID tag. You should come over and see it sometime. So Metric is the seed-to-sale tracking system that all of us licensees in Oregon are required to use. And Metric is owned by Franwell. And there is a unique number that is associated with every package in the system. And it is also a piece of paper with a UID in it. Each one of those stickers is 25 cents.
Wow.
I mean, there's just so much cost and logistics.
And disposable. It has to be
one
thrown
thinks
away at
that.
the end.
Yeah, it does. And
No one
sometimes
thinks about
we'll use a UID sticker for literally one day, and there's just a lot of small, little, daily things that are different than any other industry.
When you talk about how it's not lucrative, I mean, you're right. I think a lot of times we talk about how cannabis is this booming industry, and it is. There's a lot of people jumping in, but if you look at Oregon in particular, I mean, those profit margins have gone down significantly because, as you all know, we've covered this extensively. I mean, oversaturation and just how there's just too many grows.
Well,
There's too much flower, right?
for the past 80 years, Northern California and Southern Oregon have provided 75 to 80% of the national market. It's been illicit, but we've been growing and supplying the rest of the country. And we went legal before everybody else did.
Yeah.
And you talk to people in other states, and they're experiencing a drought because it's all stuck here in this state and it can't get out. So,
Because you can't export it.
because we can't
Because
export
we
it.
can't
Yeah.
export it.
Which is a shame for patients in places that aren't going to have high quality medicine. It isn't going to be tested to the same standards. They don't have the same
Yeah.
environmental regulations that we do. So it's oversupply, but it's actually lack of access to markets.
Which we could go on and on.
We could.
We could go on and on. I mean, there's so many out of this women in cannabis story. There are so many other stories regarding women and who are also minorities, or just minorities in general who own businesses, whether it's dispensaries or farms or whatnot. But going back, I want to piggyback off of the initiative because I highlight them. And we can talk about how it's not hopeless. This industry is not hopeless for women. With the glass ceiling, there is maybe one, but it could still be broken. It could still be shattered, but mowed. But basically, I just came up with that. Brilliant. But the initiative, Amy Margolis, and what she's got going on there, and she's the founder of the Oregon Cannabis PAC and Oregon Cannabis Association.
Yeah.
So she started, and for those of you who haven't seen the story or aren't planning on watching it, she started this cohort called the Initiative, and it essentially takes women, female-founded and female-run businesses, and it supports them, it networks them, and then essentially it makes them wealthy. It tries to make them wealthy. At the end of it, they try to lock in venture capital dollars, because again, they have to get venture capital dollars to get started or to progress. And a lot of these female-founded businesses that are in this cohort right now, they were already poised for success. I mean, most of them were pretty successful small little businesses. Like in my story, I highlight Leaf Goods and I highlight Barberry. These are kick-butt women that are so driven, coming from tech, coming from advertising, and just thought, this is what I want to do. And Amy's program is a 3-month intensive program that gets them to the level that they need to be and teaches them how to get money. So from your guys' perspective, do you think that that's the solution? Like, is this what women need to be doing?
It's part of it. I mean, it's amazing. It's great. I think also that we as women can do a better job of inviting people to our table rather than be asked to get invited. And there's just so many things, right? I mean, I'm 280E is another big barrier. I think that I'm going to keep championing 280E. I see women-owned businesses and just businesses in general struggle. Tax liability is a huge up in the middle of the night worry for folks. I think that if we can, in addition to raise the money, also lower the cost, I guess is what I'm getting at, right? Our cost of doing business is tremendous.
It's still really high.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can find efficiencies and do operational things. I think highlighting women businesses like that are successful. One of the businesses at the initiative, Toketivity,
Oh, yes.
I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah.
Partially because it really also addresses women's role in consumption of cannabis and how that functions and has a more direct relationship with the consumers.
Okay.
And as cannabis medicine is also better understood because women are largely the caregivers for their families and also make financial decisions about what kinds of purchases, having those consumer communities focused on women to do educational outreach and say, this is how you might want to use CBD for your arthritis, or this is where one-to-one might help with this particular condition. This is how you can help your family's wellness. This is how you can help your own wellness. This is how you can have a social network that, I mean, I feel safer at Toketivity than I do going to a bar because it's a safer space and I know that I'm going to be able to participate in a public social event in a very different way than, you know, I would at a bar or a party or a dance club or anything like that. So the access that Amy's getting for companies like Toketivity to be able to increase their presence is super important. Working on reducing the regulatory burdens to help make sure that the businesses that are women owned can do that, can do that better. Because the other thing that's really unique about the initiative is that it's an accelerator for cannabis touching companies. There are a number of accelerators, but few of them want to get into the intricacies of cannabis touching. They want to do tech, canna tech, or canna ancillary businesses because they don't have to deal with 280E and those levels of complexity. So Amy helping support the women right at the pointy end of the spear, being able to pitch and say, this is why it's going to have value and this is why our community is super important, helps get those women access to capital, helps spread that message, and then helps raise the bar of the things that they're doing to enable consumers to participate, which I think is a large part of why we still have hope, because women tend to be more open to this. We see older women, women 35 to 44 are one of the fastest growing demographics who are consuming cannabis in a variety of ways, for fun, for recreation, for health. So that is really hopeful because women are taking space in public sphere in a lot of ways now. And I think that that will help support the business opportunities and the kinds of things that Amy's doing to help make sure that the entire industry continues to be disruptive in that gender equation.
I'm so glad you touched on the consumer aspect because, you know, how I kind of in my mind wanted to approach this story was like, despite the fact, again, I feel a little hopeless, but despite the fact that in Oregon in particular, I mean, there's so many women-run and female-founded cannabis companies, but despite the fact that they're aiming at hiring women and promoting women and aiming their products towards women as consumers, it still feels like women can't get ahead, can't get out on top. Despite that aim, because women are the ones at home making those executive decisions for the household.
That's true. I mean, I think it's hard for us to understand the full repercussions of Me Too. I think that is still happening in cannabis and in every other industry, and we're still seeing those things happen on a regular basis. So you're seeing an intersection of a number of social disruptions, which is why I am still hopeful, because I get to hang out with people like Marissa and be like, let's do this. How are we going to do this?
You guys are pioneers.
I spoke to a woman on the East Coast yesterday. We met through a Women Entrepreneurs in Cannabis Facebook group. I introduced myself and was like, hey, this is what I'm doing. And she reached out and said, let's talk. And she's doing really cool things on the East Coast. And we're going back to D.C. to lobby the federal government in a couple of weeks. And she wants to organize a women's networking event because there's a lot of interest on the East Coast for that. And so these conversations are happening more actively and more in depth than I experienced in more traditional corporate life because it's more entrenched.
Right.
So there is still opportunity
because
we're building it. It's not as entrenched. So this is, this is what we do to change it.
We're doing it right now.
Yeah, I'll
I love hearing that.
You're doing it. Like, you're doing it. You're all doing it together.
Yeah.
Like, sister love.
You're like shining a light. Yeah, and it's fantastic.
Are you're still hopeful?
Oh, I'm very hopeful. It's still never been done before. Yeah.
You think women have a chance to skew that 27% upwards again?
I do. Things keep changing. And we keep influencing the change. I mean, with every change, we've had a little more influence on what that that changes.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's, you know, lobbying the Oregon State Legislature or serving on a rules committee at the OLCC or going to Washington, D.C., which we're going to be doing at the end of May. You know, like, we've maybe lost a few women, but I feel like we keep gaining a little more influence, and that as we continue to gain more influence, we'll bring the women with us.
It's an interesting perspective. Like, maybe the numbers are dropping off, but the voices are getting louder.
I feel like my voice has gotten louder.
I love it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I have this quote from Meryl Montgomery. She's the CEO. You know Meryl.
She's amazing.
They're blown away by these girls. College buddies that were just like, we want to smoke a joint that's not, or a spliff that's herbal blends and less dosing than
It's totally innovative. It's
really,
lovely.
Yeah.
They've been doing a brand I mean, they're very intelligent, very capable women.
Yeah.
How does that not give you hope? I mean, that's inspiring to get to meet women like that who are doing it, you know?
Just being at the initiative and meeting those women, to me personally, as someone who, you know, I haven't experienced intrinsic sexism in any workplace I've been in, and I haven't, you know, in this industry, I don't feel that. And so to be somewhere, and these women maybe haven't yet either. You know, the women that gave me their stories were like, well, I don't think I've gone through this, you know, but I'm like, but you're in a program geared towards only women to get you funding. That at the base shows how kind of what a struggle it is for women to find funding. But Meryl had this quote that I loved. She said, you know, I'm going to totally paraphrase this, but like, you know, as the industry tries to keep pushing back, you know, we're going to keep kicking and fighting. And
I love that too.
Right?
Yeah,
right? To
that
get
last
attention.
bit. Yeah, we're all going to keep kicking and fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Totally.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And again, story airing, for those of you that are just joining, story airing tonight at 6 p.m. It's going to be about a 4-minute long piece. There's an earlier version online on KGW.com right now.
They can find a link in the comments, too.
Find a link in the comments of this Facebook Live. Do we have any interesting comments coming in?
No
questions?
Yet, no.
Nothing engaging.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that you guys wanted to add while I have you? Because, again, the story doesn't delve into the nitty-gritty and the government and the regulation and the taxation, but obviously it's a major component, you know, and there's a multitude of factors as to why this number is declining, and a lot of it, as I say, you know, it goes back to traditional business structures and funding. That's really kind of the root of it, right?
Yeah. The one thing I think I would like to add, I talked to a woman this weekend. It was 420 weekend, which for us is like a big deal.
Major holiday.
Major holiday. But I talked to a woman who lives in subsidized housing, has a grandson with epilepsy, and is still afraid to give him the medicine. Because the thing that I learned more than anything else in this industry, I've experienced misogyny in the workplace. I worked in corporate sales, like, it's not surprising.
Yeah.
But the extent to which you become aware of the privileges that you have and how you walk through the world with them. I was at a summit at a marijuana business event this time last year, and I looked around the room, and it was all big money people, and it was all men in their mid to late 50s, all white. And I tried to figure out, why was this room different? What was it about it that caused that balance? And I realized that in a legal gray area, your success is largely determined by what you can get away with. And the difficulty is for people in communities who are already subject to a variety of other exclusions, trying to do cannabis is that much harder. This grandmother lives in subsidized housing, so there's a lot of restrictions on that. More likely, she's a woman of color, so she's more likely that her and her family are going to be targeted for any kind of stopping or interference with various law enforcement. They don't have money, so they don't know how to, you know, engage in those things. She was incredibly articulate, had a very, you know, important story to tell, but had been excluded from public space in all the ways that happens. And cannabis, because it's so disruptive and because it hasn't been done and because we are writing those rules, is one of those places where you start to understand how those social exclusions, how those uncodified but sort of commonly understood social functions happen.
Right.
And so these men basically were able to do business without likely being interfered with, where if they had not had those identity characteristics, they probably would have been more subject to scrutiny and had to kind of overcome those barriers as well. So for me, getting into this, being aware of where I have privilege and where I don't has been a real learning curve. I think it's been a learning curve for a lot of people in this country in the last couple of years. Like, I can own that I was asleep about some of the things and much more naive and optimistic, but it's one of the things that's most interesting, and for people who are interested in cannabis and how that legalization is happening over a long period of time, it offers the opportunity to see where those privileges get enacted and become structural differences and access to money or access, or exclusion from various processes. So for people who care, paying attention to that and trying to think as ethically as they can about disrupting those ongoing exclusions, and coming out and voting in 2020 to make sure that everyone who is making those decisions in power understand. 87% of people think it should be legal for everybody for medicine, and 64% think it should be legal for recreation or for adult use, for people to be able to make their own decisions about how it impacts their wellness regime. And so coming out in 2020 and voting to make sure that the people who are making these decisions know that is really critical.
Yeah. Anything you wanted to add?
Oh, well, Miranda was talking about privilege, and I thought of something that I have an 11-year-old son, and with privilege comes responsibility. I mean, that's a core value of me and my family and my community, and we are very privileged to participate, and with privilege comes responsibility.
And you're self-aware. I mean, I think that this, from talking to the female founders and leaders in this industry, it sounds like there is a real opportunity. As long as people are aware and cognizant of what's going on, there's an opportunity for equity. There's an opportunity for access for women. There's an opportunity for inclusiveness and diversity that perhaps no industry has ever seen. And so that's hopeful, because it's still so new.
Actually, and I just remember the City of Portland has a number of social justice equity grants that they are in the process of doing the applications for right now. And I know that they would want me to tell your audience as much as possible. They're doing educational sessions, and the Office of Civic Life at the City of Portland has information about those grants that are available from the taxes from the city to try and actually do some of that access. So for people who are interested in the industry or participating in the industry, go and check that out, because there is actual funding available from the city to be able to increase those aims.
Okay, I hadn't heard about that yet. It's a whole other story.
It's a whole other thing.
You guys were awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for both so informed and kind of the leaders. You're the leaders. You are the women that we're talking about in the story and that people need to see and hear from. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And thanks for joining us.